I stopped section one of the concluding chapter of A Realistic Path to Peace, From Genocide to Global War, um, and How We Can End It, saying the stakes are high. What if the U.S. war machine can be stopped and the U.S. disarmed? It may seem like a distant hope now, but the progression of current events could change that. The neocons in Washington are gambling big time with their proxy war against Russia, support of Israeli genocide in Gaza, and their escalating threats against China. What if they lose? That's where we're going now. Stay with me. The stakes are high. What if the U.S. war machine can be stopped and the U.S. disarmed? It may seem like a distant hope now, but the progression of current events could change that. The neocons in Washington are gambling big time with their proxy war against Asia, support of Israeli genocide in Gaza, and their escalating threats against China. What if they lose? The Palestinians refuse to retreat and are frustrating Israel's effort to crush their resistance. Russia is determined not to lose because if it were to lose, it would be broken up like Yugoslavia and the USSR. And defeating China is not likely to be any easier for the U.S. than its adventures in Korea and Vietnam, probably much harder. The U.S. war on Vietnam caused severe damage to the U.S. economy, ultimately leading to the end of the gold standard in 1971. The shift to the dollar standard, sometimes called the petrodollar standard, has worked well for the U.S. since then. But things are changing fast. Michael Hudson says the U.S.-NATO confrontation with Russia in Ukraine is achieving just the opposite of America's aim of preventing China, Russia, and their allies from acting independently of control by the U.S. over their trade and investment policy. Naming China as America's main long-term adversary, the Biden administration's plan was to split Russia away from China and then cripple China's own military and economic viability. Instead, the alliance between Russia and China has become stronger and has attracted support from an increasing number of countries throughout the world. The U.S. managed to bludgeon its European allies to go along with war, even against their own interests. But for how long? The boomerang effect of sanctions against Russia has led to economic crisis and social instability in Europe, threatening NATO unity. Meanwhile, the effect of the savage sanctions and the proxy war has been to drive Russia and China together, joining with Iran, India, and other allies, Hudson says. For the first time since the Bandung Conference of Non-Aligned Nations in 1955, a critical mass is able to be mutually self-sufficient to start the process of achieving independence from dollar diplomacy. China's central bank has taken a series of steps to accelerate the global drive toward de-dollarization, challenging the hegemony of the greenback. With the sudden emergence of de-dollarization, the U.S. economic grip on the world will diminish fairly fast. As that happens, the U.S. is sure to become even more recklessly aggressive, but it is not likely to win militarily against either Russia or China, or successfully fight a regional war in West Asia. The U.S. is overextended globally, and a majority of its people are tired of war, to say the least. Instead, we may begin to see possibilities of a post-U.S. imperialism world. It may involve passing through intensified dangers of fascism, like the fascism the U.S. has imposed in Ukraine and elsewhere, but those dangers could be mitigated by economic and political collapse at the top of U.S. society. Glimpses of this can already be seen with the disarray in Washington and the beginning of a banking crisis. This disarray could offer opportunities for positive change. What could positive change look like? Fighting against fascism can galvanize ordinary people to organize and fight back. Ajamu Baraka co-founder of the Black Alliance for Peace, says the left in the U.S. must organize an authentic, radical opposition to the ruling class and have a clear political program rooted in a people-centered human rights framework. We need to revive the anti-war movement, Baraka said. We need to demand that the resources transferred from people's needs to the military must cease. We need to place the plight of the people at the center. We need to recenter self-determination, social justice, and equality to develop effectively. We have to struggle for minimum programs of unity among the authentic left. This is a virtual call for a united front against imperialism and fascism. Easier said than done, of course, but such a call is a crucial first step. Just starting the process of building such a united front through joint actions, conferences, and other unity-building activities in dozens of localities and regional centers could trigger a chain reaction of groups coming together, as well as many people joining the effort. It could recall the popular crescendo Dr. King aroused as he organized rallies and marches in the 1960s. In his historic 1967 speech at Riverside Church, a year before he was assassinated, King said, "Our only hope today lies in our ability to recapture the revolutionary spirit and go out in a sometimes hostile world, declaring eternal hostility to poverty, racism, and militarism." The sometimes hostile world King mentioned was real. It killed him. A united front will also encounter hostility, repression, reaction, infiltration, police violence, and fascist mobs, as well as vilification by politicians and mass media. It will need to organize to counter all this. Voices across the country have already been calling for united efforts against both war and fascism. Immigrant groups have had to reach out for help against repression wherever they are. They and their support groups are likely to become part of a united front. This type of organizing can also stimulate a broader People's Democratic Front focusing on peace and democratic rights, as well as providing legal support and protection. These two fronts together can grow to include a large percentage of the general population, unions, churches, community organizations, and a wide variety of social groups. Such a mushrooming progressive coalition could turn the tide of militarism and fascist and racist reaction that has already shown itself. It would provide an answer to the noxious narratives of politicians and mass media that make it seem that everyone is for war, racism, and reaction. And it would offer a vehicle for an escalated battle for peace, as well as economic and democratic rights. Baraka says the system is no longer able to shield the reality of the profound gaps in wealth and income, the suffering and immiseration of the working class and the poor. People know the crisis that caused the crash of 2008 was never really overcome. It's increasingly hard to convince people they're getting either a fair deal or straight answers. Biden's justification of Israel's slaughter in Palestine has exposed his hysterical denunciations of Russia's aggression against Ukraine as pure hypocrisy. As U.S. bombs and tanks crush Palestinians and sacrifice Ukrainians, people start to make connections. About democracy, Baraka says there's no democracy here. We need to expand the concept of democracy, dismantle the duopoly, the Republicrats, win ranked choice voting, ban PACs, push for democratic reforms. The capitalists, he says, are providing opportunities for us if we can see them. They saw what happened with the George Floyd protests back in 2020, and they were shaken to the core by it. The working class, organized and unorganized, remains pivotal. They're on the move. Dozens and dozens of wildcat strikes and the emergence of new formations. They're putting pressure on the official union leadership. And there's hope from the South. In South America, there are very effective social movements that have seized nominal state power in various places. That represents hope. We're seeing movements leading the way towards a transformation of power. A major turning point. Radhika Desai, author of Capitalism, Coronavirus, and War, A Geopolitical Economy, says the Ukraine conflict promises to constitute a major turning point. She writes, the conflict that the West calls Russia's invasion of Ukraine and Moscow, its special military operation for Ukraine's demilitarization and denazification, is not a conflict between Ukraine and Russia. It is a phase in the hybrid war that the United States has been waging for over a century against any country that chooses an economic path other than subordination to itself or the broader capitalist world. In this war, Ukraine is the terrain and a pawn, one that can be and is being sacrificed. Desai says this more than century-long project has reached a tipping point where U.S. actions are not merely failures, they are counterproductive, accelerating the shift in the world's center of gravity away from itself and the West towards socialist China. But this does not mean China will be the successor to U.S. hegemony. China will certainly overtake the United States as the largest economy in the world, but it will still remain one among other weighty economies. We shouldn't forget that China's population is 4 times larger than the U.S. population. The bottom line is the U.S. will no longer be able to control the world. As its empire collapses, new possibilities will emerge across the globe and here at home. It's a reminder of what happened when Dorothy landed in the mythical land of Oz in the 1939 film The Wizard of Oz. When a very ordinary, that is, working-class girl is caught in a storm and swept away, she inadvertently lands on a wicked witch who has terrorized everyone in the land of Oz. She inadvertently kills the witch. The people come out dancing and singing, "Ding dong, the witch is dead." People in real life will come out dancing and singing if we can kill the witch that rules and oppresses us. Radhika Desai concludes her book with the programmatic statement, "Through pluripolarity towards socialism," a manifesto issued in 2021 during the storm of global pandemic and war. It has been signed by thousands of people around the world, individuals, organizations, and national leaders. It says we must oppose the U.S.-sponsored imperialist new Cold War and build an ambitious multilateral international governance. We must replace imperialistic domination with common values and principles to tackle common challenges. International governance needs to reflect the world's objective in developing pluripolarity, also known as multipolarity. The original ideals of the United Nations Charter and the principles of peaceful coexistence advocated by the non-aligned movement are excellent foundations for further constructing alternatives to institutions of U.S. and Western dominance. Saying all this doesn't make it so. Getting there, as the saying goes, is half the fun and is our current challenge. It's a long march, of course, but there really are no shortcuts. In many parts of the world, the process has already begun. In some Latin American countries, neoliberal and pro-fascist regimes have been replaced. The CIA has fought back with coups in Bolivia and Peru, but the most recent coup in Bolivia was reversed. There have been more than 190 coups and revolution in Bolivia since its independence in 1825. So Bolivia holds the record, but there have been innumerable coups throughout the Americas in the past 2 centuries. In most cases, the coup's purpose was to restore capitalist control after local people moved to reclaim their national patrimony. Pedro Castillo, the president of Peru who was deposed in December 2022, had condemned foreign companies for pillaging his country. He wanted to renegotiate contracts to ensure 70% of all proceeds from mining would go to the state to fund social programs. Let's be clear, Castillo said. These decades of betrayal, corruption, and cynicism are the symptoms of this neoliberal system, dedicated exclusively to the exploitation of our people and natural resources for the benefit of a few scoundrels. He declared, "We are rescuing the resources of the country for all Peruvians." His goal? We want our natural resources to directly benefit the people. What a concept. The U.S. ambassador in Peru, Lisa Kenna, is a CIA veteran who supported the December 2022 parliamentary coup that overthrew Castillo. One day before the December 7th coup, the former CIA officer turned U.S. ambassador met with Peru's defense minister, who then told the country's powerful military to turn against President Castillo. After the coup, Kenna met with Peru's mining and energy ministers to discuss investments. Europe is now importing Peruvian liquid natural gas to replace what it lost when the Nord Stream pipeline blew up. Leaders of Peru's neighbors in the rest of Latin America have condemned the coup. In 2019, following the U.S.-backed coup in Bolivia, electric car magnate Elon Musk tweeted, "We will coup whoever we want. Deal with it." In Venezuela and Nicaragua and Cuba, the people and their revolutionary governments deal with it by defending their sovereignty. Many people in the U.S. and everywhere are dealing with it by changing sides in support of the victims. The day of reckoning is likely to come sooner than expected, as a result of the extremely bad gamble the U.S. neocons are taking against Russia, China, and the people of Palestine. For many, that day cannot come soon enough. As U.S. hegemony wanes, new possibilities will emerge across the globe and here at home. The maniacs in Washington may try to do what they've done before, using extreme measures to hold back change. But popular forces in this country and around the world can and must intervene to protect our interests and make change happen. A new multipolar world is dawning that will replace the old imperialist order with peace and common prosperity for a shared future. It is the destiny of today's generation to hasten its arrival. That's the end of my conclusion. Thank you very much for your patience if you managed to stay with me for the whole thing. I hope to speak with you again soon. Meanwhile, feel free to get back to me with any comments or questions. You can email me at dknight816@gmail.com.